So for more on this discussion, we're going to bring in a spokesperson for the National Shooting Sports Foundation, Mark Oliva. He joins us now. Mark, thanks very much for being with us. I'm really glad you're here because really you're representing a group of people that I've always wondered about. I'm not a shooter. You know, there's one gun in the house I grew up in. It was my dad's service weapon. He just kept it, I think. So I'm not part of the gun-owning America. And now I note, though, that in the National Shooting Sports Foundation response to the Uvalde shooting, you guys said that you've led efforts to improve background checks to include mental health records into the FBI's background check system. So I wonder about what we call responsible gun owners, right? The vast majority of Americans want universal background checks, enhanced background checks. Vast majority of Americans for red flag laws on issues like psychological propensity to violence. What's the solution here? And what's the problem you're targeting, and can it be solved?
Yeah, so I appreciate you having me on today and the opportunity to speak to this. And we have been at the table with this. And we talk about the improvements that the National Shooting Sports Foundation has been at the lead trying to improve the background check system to make it more effective. After 2013, we realized that not every state was submitting all disqualifying mental health records to the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System. So we worked with those states, and we changed the law in 16 states to get them to submit those records. And in 2018, we worked with Congress to get the Fix NICS Act, which was named after our program. And we worked with Senator John Cornyn, probably your most pro-Second Amendment senator in the Senate. And then on the lead on the Democrat side was Senator Chris Murphy, probably your most pro-gun control senator in the Senate. And these two were able to find a common ground. And this is what common ground looks like, working to make sure that the background check system works the way it was intended. Since we started our program, there's been a 270% increase of submission of mental health background records that would disqualify people who should never have those guns in their hands in the first place. We're continuing to work on those programs. And with that kind of spirit, we want to work with Congress. We want to work with anybody who's willing to sit at the table to talk about viable solutions that are going to be able to resolve these types of incidents while respecting the rights of law-abiding Americans to be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights.
Which is a very fair point, and which brings me just to the AR-15s. Let's talk about these weapons specifically. They are often at the center of these mass shootings, as you know. It was the weapon used to slaughter those 19 kids and 2 teachers in Uvalde. 11-year-old got his hands on that today, and now we discover in this shooting yesterday in Tulsa, the suspect, Michael Lewis, also used the same type of weapon where 4 people died. Why shouldn't there be limitations of some type when it comes to buying these specific types of weapons?
So I think the question that we're really asking here is, are we willing to curtail the rights of law-abiding citizens? The AR-15 is a semi-automatic rifle that operates in much the same way as my duck hunting shotgun. It fires one trigger pull for 1 round that's expended. It is much different than the rifle I carried in the Marine Corps. You see the flag behind me has a Marine Corps emblem. For 25 years, I served in the Marine Corps, but the rifle I carried in the Marine Corps was an automatic rifle. You could pull the trigger and it would shoot 3 rounds every time you pulled that trigger. The rifle that I have in my gun safe today is not the same rifle that I carried. So I think when we're talking about, trying to make hardware bans, we're not really addressing the issue. Obviously, the crimes that we're seeing committed here are the crimes of irrational and deranged people. Again, I've carried a rifle in war. I've been shot at. I've returned fire to the enemy. I have guns in my home. But I don't ever consider the idea of taking a firearm out of my home to cause harm to anybody else. It's not a rational thought. So we're not dealing with rational people.
You're different. Right, but I understand that point. You served in the military. You were trained, and also look at what you do as a profession. That makes sense. But looking at Uvalde, right, and other mass shootings, but Uvalde in particular, why should an 18-year-old have the ability to walk into a store and buy that type of weapon?
And you're absolutely right. As we're learning more about this suspect, the murderer in Uvalde, there were warning signs that people had indicated early on that he should never have been allowed to have a firearm in his possession. But those actions were never taken up with authorities. You have the tools that are available to report these people, to bring them before authorities, to reach out to get a mental health evaluation on some of these folks and have them brought before a judge. And maybe these people need to be involuntarily committed to a mental health facility. maybe we need to be looking at expansion of so-called red flag laws or extreme risk protection orders, so long as they include due process rights considerations. And I think that those are some of the responsible discussions that are happening right now in the Senate.
When we're just looking at this poll, Mark, that says 86% of Americans support red flag laws. I think in most instances, even in our broken democracy, you get 86% of Americans. You can't get 86% of Americans to agree that it's Thursday, right? I mean, you get 86% of Americans to agree on something. Something should happen, right? More than that, 88% of Americans agree on universal background checks, not just for sales from licensed dealers, but at gun shows, private sales. Every sale of a weapon should be accompanied by an enhanced, hopefully, universal background checks. That, as I say, must include many, many, many people engaged in shooting sports, responsible gun owners. Why can't we get it done?
So I think when we're talking about these red flag laws, and the National Shooting Sports Foundation has never opposed red flag laws so long as they include due process rights in the writing of those laws. We have concerns about ex parte orders. We want to make sure that if you are going to have your rights seized from you, that you have the ability to get in front of a judge and challenge that evidence. We want to make sure that people aren't abusing that. And when we talk about universal background checks, it sounds great on paper, but when we start to look at it, it actually runs into problems with the 1986 Firearm Owner Protection Act. For the universal background check system to work, you have to have a national firearm registry, and that is against the law. The federal government cannot maintain a national firearm registry. So we have very serious concerns. And when we look at H.R. 8, there are even more concerns that get down into the weeds on how that bill is written, which would make it impossible for a firearm retailer to stay within ATF regulations and follow federal law at the same time. They actually run counter to one another the way that bill is written.
So what reform would have stopped the Uvalde shooter from going into that store and being able to purchase that gun?
I think first and foremost, we need to start protecting our children the same way we protect our most valuable national assets. And these are our most valuable national assets. I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent. My children and my grandchildren are the most important thing to me in this world. And I don't want to negate anybody's ability to be able to protect themselves or their loved ones. And that's what we're talking about when we start talking about some of these bans and we talk about raising age limits on people being able to purchase their firearms. At 18 years old, you are an adult, fully vested in for all your rights, whether that be your First Amendment rights, your Fourth Amendment rights, or your Second Amendment rights.
I get that, but what I'm hearing you say is that you don't think there's a reform that could have stopped that person from buying that weapon. You would have wanted a fortified school that would have stopped them from killing the children.
I think you're misreading some of what I'm talking about. Again, we have never opposed red flag laws, and there were indications that there were opportunities to intervene, that this young man had indicated that he wanted to harm fellow classmates, that he had made indications that he wanted to shoot up a school. He had made warnings that he was going to do it just a week out from doing it, 10 days out from doing it. So there were opportunities to intervene and stop this from happening. And I think if we use the tools the tools that are available to us,
but okay,
we can make a.
With all those records, and we're not meaning to be combative here, but in all honesty here, let's say you had all those warning signs, right? Should all those warning signs be put into a data system so that way when a young man like the Uvalde shooter walks into a store on a day he's ready to shoot up a school and can just easily buy this gun, that somehow within the system when his name and his age and his birthday is put in to purchase this weapon, that we would see that the gun store would see these red flags? I mean, be specific.
And again,
what would have stopped? If all the warning signs were there, what would have stopped him from buying that gun?
I'm being very specific here. When you invoke a red flag law, an extreme risk protection order, that automatically makes that individual a prohibited person from buying a firearm, from possessing a firearm. You can seize those firearms from that person who may be a threat to themselves or be a threat to others. Indications were there. He made threats, and those threats were never passed on to authorities for them to be able to act upon. That would have stopped him from being able to purchase those firearms.
Right. And I wonder, these threats happened on social media. He was on social media issuing these violent threats. He was on social media bragging about even sharing his torture and killing of animals. And I wonder if you'd think it would be right for social media companies to red flag people like that. I've said this before. Look, if I'm buying a sofa, I click on one sofa online instantly. My junk email, my junk texts, every web page I click on, my social media, nothing. I see sofas. Why can't, if somebody's talking about torturing and killing animals, or issuing violent threats online. Why can't they flag me to merchants? Why can't they flag this kid, somebody like this kid, to the police, to the courts?
There's nothing that ever stops the social media companies from contacting local police to let them know that this is happening and this is occurring. So it's very valid. You see, I'm here at the table having this discussion with you. I'm willing to engage with people who have very strongly held beliefs that run counter to my own. I think that's where we need to start. But I don't see anybody from the social media companies sitting here having the same debate.
I'd like to see you, Mark, get in there and debate those social media companies. Knowing you, you'd be able to get something done.
Let's hope.
Mark, thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me today.